Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, and today I am hanging out with Andrew Cawood of Cawood Publishing, and you have a bunch of products on the DMs Guild, Drive-Thru RPG. You also do a podcast, I believe, as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a podcast on iTunes, West of the Wood, my weekly group. Yeah.
Is that an actual play?
It is, yeah. It's just pretty raw, from the game, but we try to cut out a few of the non-essentials. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we've been known to put on our just our regular in-person games, and we just kind of slap on the camera and then throw them up, and it's amazing how many people will watch and listen to that stuff. and because it's also like less focused. Like if you watch Critical Role or some of the other stream stuff's a lot more focused because they've got a camera and they're set up and everything. But with us, it's like somebody might be eating pizza, a baby might run across the table. I don't know, things happen.
Yeah. Yeah, our game, we have had a few disturbances from my toddler. But we're really lucky with her, so it's usually not a big deal. But yeah, it's and actually I enjoy watching the more authentic games like that, and to me it's a lot more fun.
Yeah, I've heard other people say that as well, and it always kind of surprises me. Like we were talking a little bit before we started. We were talking about sports, and I was like, when it comes to sports, I'm kind of like the same way I am with D&D and gaming is like I'd rather be participating and playing than watching someone else do the thing.
Yeah, and I'm the same way too, for the most part. But I was saying that when I do mention sports at my table, it's the rest of the group tunes out, and
everyone's eyes just glaze over.
Yeah, and then they want me to get back into some real topic, like Firefly or Rick and Morty, something like that.
Yeah, it's as if you can't sleep on the table.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, we have you here today to talk about Fae creatures because you have a little Kickstarter going on, and you're almost to your goal. And I was actually I'd seen the Kickstarter, and I've listened to the video before.
Yeah. And
I've been on the page, and it wasn't until this morning that I was looking over things that I realized that Travis Hanson's doing the art for you guys. We've actually had him on the show before. And he does some, and I share his Life of the Party comic strips on our page all the time.
Right. Yeah, that's how we found him actually, and we love the work that he does, and he actually does more than one style. So that very cartoon style he does for Life of the Party is different than what's going in our Kickstarter. But that's how we found him, and then for our last Kickstarter for Hirelings and Henchmen, a big NPC book that's on Drive-Thru. He did some work for us, and we loved it. And he's one of those artists who just moves like you would not believe. Like for this project, we actually asked people to decide on a few of the monsters on polls, and then I told Travis, and then he would get an image to me. On the last one we were going to do this week, he said, "Well, I don't really have time. Can you just let me know right now?" So I told him what monster was going to be next. Half an hour later, I get a sketch back on Facebook. Half an hour after that, he's got an inked version, and an hour after that, there's the beautiful color version.
The guy's prolific and
unreal.
And
unreal.
Whenever we get artists on, I always like to ask them like, how much time do you spend drawing a day? And he was like one of the first ones that we had on here, and we talked about that, and it's like 10 to 12 hours a day just drawing.
Yeah.
So you better like it.
Yeah. And I'm not an artist like in that way, but I am the same in terms of writing. That once I get into it, it's almost like time bends. And like I said, that we just did an NPC guide. We have a new one coming out, and I looked at the page or the word count the other day, and it's 72,000 words. So yeah, I really appreciate that kind of person who gets into the groove, and Travis is definitely like that.
Well, I found all the artists I've talked to that are serious about their craft and are known in doing things. They all do the same thing. They're all Yeah, they all essentially are chained to a desk with a pen or pencil in their hands. Level 88 wanted to know if you touch on Archfey at all in the product.
We definitely will. Yeah. So the Kickstarter is in good shape. It's got about only, I think, 9%. I looked this morning to get backed. We have 4 days left, so it goes till this Saturday. And yeah, we have a list of over 200 monsters, but we're going to put 100 in. We've listed 5. We gave images for 5. The stat blocks will all be out this week, and then we'll have 1 new monster coming out today or tomorrow. The last one I was telling you about that Travis did. So Archfey definitely, and I'm looking at having quite a few high-level creatures like CR 15 to 30. So the Archfey, we're planning to have those in that range.
Okay.
So some very powerful creatures. We have one that we put out on the Kickstarter page already, and the stat block I'll put out today, the Skeleton King, which is very similar to an Archfey. It's kind of a bit of a lich, but it has a number of other abilities as well. It can spider climb. It can cast Time Stop. So quite an interesting character.
Now, I only know of one product currently out that really addresses Archfey at all, Tome of Beasts. Did you look at that at all to be like, okay, what are the holes we can plug here, or were the things like, I want to do my spin on this?
We did look at what it came out, especially. I'll just look here. I wrote down. If you look in the monster manual, there's a grand total of 7 Fae. I couldn't even believe that when I looked again. So there's the Dryad, the Blink Dog, the Satyr, the 2 kinds of Hags, the Sprite, and the Pixie, and that's it. So we looked at that and went, well, there's massive gaps there. Wizards closed it a little with Redcap, Boggle, Quickling, a few others. And then, like you said, there's a few third-party collections that have had some Fae, but we think there's a huge area there to look at. I mean, there's no Nymph. You could do tons more Hags. There's tons of magical trees you could do. We're looking at doing one like on the cover of the Kickstarter up here. The tree, it's going to be like the Elder Brain, except a tree version of it in the forest. So yeah, there's no Brownie, there's no Naiad, there's only one kind of centaurs could be Fae. I could go on and on. Like I say, we have a list of over 200 possibilities. So far, we put in the Skeleton King, the Frog Witch, the Black Unicorn, so a dark version of the unicorn, a Fey Ranger, which is a little bit like an Eladrin Ranger Rogue kind of creature, and the Flying Goblin, that's quite new. An idea of a goblin that's a little bit more bulky than the traditional goblin, and and then also the new creature that we're going to put out this week.
Yeah, the Flying Goblin in appearance anyway reminded me a little bit of a less elemental gargoyle.
Yeah, exactly.
So Jared Smith wants to know, what Fae are you looking most forward to?
Oh, wow. Well, my background from when I got into literature period and stories period was reading books about Fae when I was a little kid in Africa, actually. And so to me, the foundation of fantasy is Fae. So I'm really looking forward to I love everything about Fae. One that I really love to look at is this elder tree idea of this tree that has a massive area that it can communicate. It can communicate maybe with treants as well. Can use roots to trip up people or entangle people, but also isn't evil and isn't good. Is one of those Fae that's in the middle and then could go either way. The Archfey, there's a real lack of very powerful creatures for more powerful PCs. So all those powerful Archfey, we're looking at a few new kinds of dragons as well. So a lot of those, and some of those mythical types that have been omitted, like the Brownie, just a regular fairy. and to look at the hierarchy and the factions and the Fae, the Seelie and Unseelie. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the whole thing. That's why I came up with the book.
Yeah, and that's actually Mighty Hobbs' question is, do you touch upon Seelie Unseelie courts? Sounds like you do for sure. And also, behind the screen asks, he wants to know the difference between Fae and Archfey. You can take that one if you want, or I can cover it. Doesn't matter.
Sure. I mean, there's different ways to look at it. A lot of these words are used in different ways, even Seelie and Unseelie sometimes. So the Archfey, for the most part, are in the upper levels of the hierarchy of the Fae, and really, really powerful creatures. So probably in 5th edition, like I said, you're talking CR 20 and above, most likely, for those creatures, and very many different kind of capabilities. Yeah, and one of the reasons we're looking at the hierarchy and some of those factions, that wasn't going to be a really big part of the book, but as we talked more and more to our backers, we had a live AMA, and we've been on social media a lot. A lot of people want that, and I've also found more out about the Jim Butcher series, and looked at that. So definitely, we're going to incorporate that more than we were when we started.
I was going to ask you about that because, I'm no expert on fairy lore, but in the Butcher series they have Seelie, Unseelie, and then there's the Wild Fae,
right?
Which kind of can go either way.
Yeah. So we're looking at that kind of thing as well. In fact, the new creature that's going to come out this week, and I can do it exclusive here. It's going to be one of the dragons that we were thinking of putting in. So this dragon is going to be in that realm of the Wild Fae, that it could go either way, and it's going to be very unpredictable.
Oh, nice. Elfbait wants to know, will you be drawing from Fae traditions of cultures across the world?
Definitely across the world. Yeah, actually, if you look at all the pages that I've been saving right now on my computer, and things we've been reading up, and our list, like I said, of over 200 creatures. Yeah, and like I said, I come from a really, I guess, unusual perspective, I think, because I grew up with all that mythology, but I was living in Africa at the time as a kid. So I was in this very hot climate with tarantulas and all these different creatures around, kind of an exotic world. And as a kid, the literature I was reading was all European creatures and European settings. So even though I was far from that, I fell in love with it, and I've always felt close to it. But I do have that connection to other cultures, and we can draw from different myths all over. Yeah.
So actually, I've grown up in Africa. Were you able to kind of tap into those mythologies?
Yeah, there's a few things that we could look at. I was 10 when I came to North America, so I didn't live there that long out of my life. I've almost been here 40 years. So I consider myself sort of half and half Canadian and South African, but where you come from when you're a kid is always a huge influence on you. So yeah, I definitely, some of the creatures that we used to find and we used to play with. I remember my brother and I discovered one day this. It literally looks like a potato with little legs and arms, and they call it a potato frog. And this thing crawled out of the garden and next to our house, and that helps open up your imagination to some pretty amazing creatures.
If you need an expert on Russian folklore, we have one of those we're hanging around too.
All right.
Yeah, Boris Stremlin is one of the people that shows up in a lot of our comments and chats and stuff, and he always leaves these like huge, super cerebral, in-depth comments, and we've had him on before, and he's also a professor, and I think he specializes in Russian history. So he's done quite a few gaming stuff, like even in his own games with that.
Wow. Well, funny you say that, because somebody was asking what are my favorite parts about the Fae? Well, another favorite part are witches and hags. I love them. If you ask my weekly group, one's going to show up every once in a while. And so we already have this frog witch character we put into the story. But another option, and talking about other myths, is Baba Yaga, of course, which I fell in love with from the Dragon magazine in the 80s. There was, I believe, an adventure in one of the Dragon magazines in the early or mid 80s, which I just thought was amazing. Which now Wizards has put into the Curse of Strahd.
How can you not love a hut with chicken legs?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or at least someone who lives in that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you gotta love like surprising your players in 1985 with it, and then now surprising my players in 2017 with it.
Yeah, as you're about to enter the hut, it stands up on chicken legs.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Aaron Parks wants to know about leprechauns.
Yeah, leprechauns is definitely right now sitting on the top 100. Yeah, I have somebody in my group from Ireland, and she's lobbying hard.
Nice. So for St. Paddy's Day, we ran. It just happened to fall on the weekend, and we were gaming that night. I'm like, I gotta do something leprechaun themed here, for St. Paddy's Day, and I just did like a really cheesy rip off of the Leprechaun movie, and did like a murder mystery with with the coins. And I'm surprised how long it took them to catch on. It was so awful.
So it went well.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see. Dom wants to know, is there full color image for all the creatures, and what lore do you delve into?
All right. So the images, that's one of the reasons we needed a larger budget. Our first 2 Kickstarters that were successful, the budget was about a quarter of this, but that's mostly because of the art. Before we'd have a little bit of art. I'll just show you quickly in our last book, Hirelings and Henchmen, which Travis Hanson, the same artist we're working with this time, he did a couple of images. So here's one. So, and there's just a book with, scattered art through it. However, this book, what we want to do is every single creature is going to have an image, a color image. So that's the reason that the budget is so high. And so we'll have a color cover. The whole thing will be colored throughout. The other question about the lore, you name it. Like we talked about, talking about the different courts. We're not going to be able to go into massive amount of detail with that, but we will have some of it connected to the creatures' stat blocks and little bios. And at the same time, because we've had so much interest in that being a part of the book, we're going to find places that we can put it in. One person asked, can you put a few little tables here and there for example, plants that you might find in the Feyland, and like have a table of what could be the different effects of these plants if you ate them. So that kind of thing we want to add in. So we want to try to put as much lore in the stat blocks and then around the monsters as well, because we're not going to have a lot of extra pages other than the monster stat blocks. And we will do some tables with dividing the creatures up by CR rating and type. And we've had a request from backers to put in a table for random encounters. So that's very likely as well.
We love our random encounters. That is for sure.
Yeah, well, especially those of us who played in the 80s where tables were everywhere.
Yeah. But they've kind of bastardized and ruined my tables. Well, because everything, it's like the appropriate CR for the appropriate challenge rating for the appropriate level. Oh yeah. And back when you started playing and I started playing, there was none of that. You could be first level and get squished by a dragon with a bad roll. But I haven't put them away yet, but in front of me is sitting my random encounter cards, and I did get this something snuck in here when they were working on them, and you know, instead of just being, they were originally listed by CR, and then they added, you know, and terrain, but then they added it like a D10, so now it can be, you know, truly random. Pick a card, drop a D10, and then you have a random encounter.
Nice. Yeah, the way I like to do it, and I have we made a setting, the World of Mir, which we use in our weekly group, and those random tables for me, I make the table for that area of the world. I don't care what CR the party is or anything like that. That's what's in that part of the world. And then as a DM, if they happen to, you know, encounter something that's very powerful, then there's options you have, right? You know, number one, the party runs, which my group almost never does. Sometimes to their detriment, but that's one option. Another one obviously is allies, and then other effects like a weather effect, or maybe the evil creature just decides that they're not going to attack them for whatever reason. Maybe they want information from the party. Maybe they don't consider the party important. They run into them at 5th level, and then 15th level it comes back to haunt them. So I agree with you. I'd rather have a random table that is realistic than try to make one for each level.
Yeah, 3rd edition and 4th edition kind of ruined the game in the sense that it changed the players' expectations to feel like they're always going to face an encounter that they can win. You know, instead of what would be or might be organically in the world.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, Jim Davis on WebDM always talks about that, which I just discovered his show. And that was one of the first times I'd heard somebody say that in 5th edition especially, a lot of parties just charge in now. And they are very confident. I mean, the characters are quite powerful, I think, in this edition. But I agree with you. And I think as a DM, I want to push my party and challenge them to push them back into more of the original D&D, where they actually had to check for traps, and they actually had to check to go slowly. And the most important thing, which just happened in our weekly group, they assaulted a bandit castle without doing any recon. 0. And there were consequences. Like, not a lot of characters die in our group, but they know it's a possibility. And 2 PCs and a really important NPC were killed. And mostly because there was no recon. 0.
In the game that I'm running now, I had the players come upon a ritual where the bad guys, the enemies, basically open a rift, blow off the top of a mountain, and fly out this giant, you know, basically like flying pyramid with you know, with an like a cyborg Empyrean on it, and they're like 4th or 5th level. And they're trying to figure out how to get up there to fight him. You know, like they're trying to, like, they're flying, and they're like trying to attach ropes to javelins. They're like, "Can we get up there?" I'm like, now my brother, who's played with me for a long time, is like, he's narrating. You should probably stop.
Yeah, no, it's very true that, you know, like what you said, that people expect the encounter is going to be manageable, where sometimes the best move is to leave, or to bring more allies, or to check out the area before. It's ironic too, because like the games become less tactical, less strategic like that, and I don't get to play that much. And I notice when I do play, that's my number one focus, is doing that first. Maybe that comes from being a DM for most of my time with the game. And I try to encourage that with my players. You know, I use NPCs to encourage that. I use deaths to encourage that. Yeah, I think it makes the game more fun.
So Behind the Screen wants to know, since Archfey are the higher tier of Fey, could a lower tier Fey like a Dryad become an Archfey? And how would that work in terms of the Dryad's evolution?
Yeah, that's a good point. There's definitely something we're looking at are even the creatures that are in the monster manual, and as I said, there's only 7 Fae. I noticed they tried to even stretch it out by saying that the sea hag and the green hag in their lair with different monsters. So we have 9. No, you still just have 7 monsters. So yeah, what we're looking at is, for example, something like the sprite. So we thought, what about other versions of the sprite? What about a sprite, more warrior type sprite? So a lot of these creatures could have different versions and more powerful versions. So yeah, for sure, a dryad. Maybe we have a dryad queen. One of the creatures I was looking at was a hag queen. So I think there's a lot of options for hags. There's 2 new ones in Volos. There's 2 Fae hag in the monster manual. So we could have a hag queen, and that would be one difficult task. It could be something like a Baba Yaga, or even we could make it Baba Yaga as well.
So with the Fae, they're about making deals and bargains. So it almost becomes like a currency to them. I would see a lesser Fae who has proven quite successful in that arena would gradually gain more and more power and influence, and that's, in my opinion, that's how you would kind of like rank them up, and that might be the story of ascension for a Fae.
Yeah, for sure. That's a lot of the stories, a lot of the myth. That's a big focus, and one of the creatures we created, the Skeleton King, which is basically an Arc Fae. Not only is that his path, he originally was an elf who was twisted into this Dark Fae version, and then he made his way to where he is, basically the king of the skeletons, a king of the Dark Fae. He doesn't necessarily just go. He's very dangerous, but he's not just going to kill intruders into his land or visitors to his land. He is going to play with them, and like you said, he's going to make deals with them. And there's nothing to say that these creatures, like you say, weren't making deals with each other as well.
Do you have any Warlock sidebars?
The only thing we've looked at is looking at what kind of creatures could we use as patrons. So we haven't made any decisions about that, but we know that that's an option. Yeah.
Seems like a natural fit for this type of product.
Yeah, like for example, the Skeleton King could be a Fae patron for an evil warlock. Yeah. And the Frog Witch that we have, you could have that as a patron for an evil warlock who, has that kind of reptilian theme as well.
Do you think the Frog Witch gets her chops busted a lot when all the witches meet? What are you, the witches of frogs?
Yeah, it's funny, that's been the most popular creature that we've had out by far. Like, it's not even close. And I was surprised. And it's actually a twisted version of when I first started back in the game. I left D&D for a long time, and I came back just before 5th edition. And my first adventure, one of the allies of the party was a Frog Witch. And she was basically a chaotic neutral character who usually was helpful, but not always, and didn't always give the answers. And she rode on this giant frog, and she could summon frogs and had a lot of magic and was very powerful. So a lot of the evil creatures in the area were afraid of her as well. And when we made this book, I thought, let's make a dark version of that. Let's say, what if she was chaotic evil and not chaotic neutral? And what if she could do things like croak and knock players to the ground in a wide radius? What if she could cast more spells that were druid spells, basically? So yeah, she's become the most popular creature that we've added.
Now, you mentioned a couple times now that you coming back to the hobby. So what brought you back?
Well, really, it was the number one thing was a book called Of Dice and Men, and I was on holiday in California, and I read that book and I remembered playing. I hadn't played since the late 80s, and I kind of thought to myself, why did I ever stop playing this game? And remembering how much I loved it. And what I had been doing in the meantime was mostly teaching. And the number one way I used to teach was through storytelling, and mostly fantasy. So basically what I'd done is been practicing dungeon mastering, storytelling, organizing groups for 20 years. And we came back from the holiday, and I thought, with the internet now, it must be really easy to get groups together, or much easier than when you were in a not very big city in the 80s. And the first group I contacted, they were like, we really need a DM. Can you show up on Sunday? And I showed up at this house, didn't know anybody, and I just made a little village, and outside the village was a forest with the frog witch. And I thought I'd made a kind of interesting beginning to a story that could be something bigger, but it was pretty much just the village on the edge of a forest. And as I started telling the story, running the game, nothing had changed from 1986 or 87 till whatever it was, 2015. It was exactly the same experience for me. And yeah, I was wondering, why did I ever leave this game?
Yeah, it's funny. We actually did a video we shot this weekend about D&D stories, right? There's lots of like videos out there that tell specific D&D stories as kind of like entertainment, but like we wanted to kind of like dive into the topic a little bit deeper of like what D&D stories do for us as people, and our communities and the hobby, and how it just brings people together. So there was here's the question. Jason wants to know about any chance on a Knuckle V. I might not be saying that properly, which is probably true. It's Nuckellavee.
I'm not familiar with that. Yeah, I'll have to look. I'll definitely watch this stream again and check it out. But I don't know that creature.
So we have another question from Cristiano. How many creatures beyond the Black Unicorn can do no save damage?
Oh, that's pretty rare. That's really what we wanted to do with the unicorn, is take the regular unicorn and make it the slightly twisted versions. So we went through every different ability of the creature, and we tried to match it with a dark version. So that is something that's similar to the Drow mage and the Drow priestess. When they attack with their staff or scourge, there's poison damage that comes with the bludgeoning damage from the staff. So that's something similar, and there's no save. So there's a few examples like that in 5th edition. So that's probably one of the only times that'll happen. We have the Skeleton King monster in this book where there's something similar, but there will be a save. So I think the Black Unicorn will be one of the only creatures like that. And like I say, the only reason is we wanted to make a close relative to the Celestial Unicorn in the Monster Manual. We wanted to match it as much as possible.
Cool. Yeah, we've been actually getting a decent amount of questions coming in, throughout the stream here. And usually, when people are really interested, there's a lot of questions, or there's none because they're just listening to people talk. So
yeah.
So Aaron wants to know, will there be unique Fae like Oberon, Titiana, and Puck?
Yeah, very likely the upper royalty, the mythical upper royalty, like those three, will be in there. Yeah, very, very good chance. And like I said, we want to make sure we have everything from 0 challenge rating level all the way up to probably 30. And there's a real gap for that higher level. So we need a lot of creatures, I'd say, from CR 20 to 30. And those will be, like, definitely the King and Titania and Oberon will be in that realm, as well as things like the Skeleton King. Some of the dragons will be up there. Yeah.
Yeah, especially at the upper tier, because right now, like, one of the most powerful creatures we have is the Tarrasque.
Yeah.
And the Tarrasque is actually fairly weak for its challenge. Unfortunately.
Look at the intelligence, right?
Yeah, it's not very intelligent.
Isn't it 5 or something?
And I'm not even sure if it's that high, but it's real easy if you don't have a creative DM for the players to kite that monster and just pick it off. Which I've heard people doing, like, I've heard ridiculous stories of, like, a 5th level mage being able to take on the Tarrasque because they just fly out of its reach and ping it to death. Now, that would never happen in my game, because if you get out of my Tarrasque's reach, he picks up hunks of earth and throws it at you. And he's going to do a lot of damage with it.
Yeah. Intelligence 3. I just looked there. So, yeah, I think there is the big need for some really nasty creatures up there in the higher levels. I've heard people people have even put videos out about how to kill the Tarrasque.
So behind the screen, are there any unique mechanical features for the creatures that we can look forward to?
For sure. I mean, we're looking at a lot of different abilities. So I'll just give you an example of some of them. Some of those themes that you see in the Arc Fae or in the myths. So things like, for example, ability to affect dreams of players. So right now, that's a very limited ability. There's the Night Hag who can get into people's dreams. Charm abilities, but a lot more variations of that. Ways of dealing with time. So, for example, the Skeleton King, which is one of our first 6 creatures, he can cast Time Stop. There's not much around dealing with emotion in the game. There's the spell Calm Emotion. So we'd like to add more variation with that. And like Dave said, in terms of making deals, we'll put something in there in terms of the mechanics around deals as well. We might even combine that with a charm ability that forces a character to get into a deal, or at least the beginnings of a deal. There's also Heart Sight, which is one of the Fae abilities of a creature that's already in the book. So a version of that we might look into. A lot of different things in terms of a spell like Misty Step or Teleport, but a variation of that. Illusions, of course, and Sleep. Right now, Sleep is a very simple mechanic, so we'd like to do some versions of that. And then animating objects. There's a little more added to that now with the Catapult spell, but we'd like to have some more, play with that some more as well. For example, maybe the Fae in their home, like some of these Fae royalty, could animate large sections of their environment. They could even animate like armies of animated armor, swarms of flying swords or weapons instead of just 1 or 2.
So, because the numbers, you keep mentioning the numbers, I actually just jumped over onto D&D Beyond, and brought up every Fae that exists officially, and there's only 18.
Yeah,
doesn't go past 1 page, and actually for any content creator or creator of any kind, D&D Beyond is the best tool that you can use for sorting things and finding what you need. Red Jackal, what traditions are you pulling your Fae creatures from? I know you said all over, but are there any specific ones?
Well, we're going to try to have a range. I mean, like I said, my personal experience comes, a European background who grew up in Africa, and then I moved to North America. And then here we have, of course, in Canada, we say the First Nations traditions. So respectfully looking at different areas would be what we'd like to do. And then we will focus on some of those myths that have a lot of literature focused on them. So some inspiration, we talked about the Jim Butcher books, but there's another trilogy here called, the first book is The Various, and that's a more European version of it. So yeah, we'll look at some different traditions.
Same person, Red Jack. Also, will the Horned King and the Wild Hunt be in the book?
The Horned King, that's another one I have to note. I'll have to look at that. But the Wild Hunt, yeah, it's on our list. Yeah, and we're thinking about how to work on that mechanic. Do we break it up? Do we just have one monster that's considered the Wild Hunt? That's where I'm leaning towards right now. Yeah.
And then Malady, Lord of Collapse, wants to know, will there be templates for altering creatures in the book?
For which creatures?
Templates for altering creatures. See, you don't even know. You hardly know about templates. You skip third edition and fourth edition, so that was like a big thing. Yeah. They have it in fifth edition, but very sparingly used. And a template is just something you slap on another creature to alter it.
To honor it?
Alter, like half dragon. There's only a couple of them in the monster manual.
Okay. Yeah, like half dragon or half orc. You mean that kind of?
No. It's very specific. So, in previous editions, like third edition, you could make a creature celestial, fiendish. There would be there was half dragon, half fiends, which is different than being fiendish, but it would in essence alter certain statistics to the creature as well as where they are from.
Okay.
There's very little of it in fifth edition.
Yeah, that's something interesting to look at for sure. I know when I did look through the monster manual and saw the half dragon, it piqued my interest for sure, because I'm not familiar with that creature. It wasn't around in the original version. So yeah, like Dave said, I'm coming from a place of knowing first edition and fifth edition, and I've missed 2, 3, 4, which in some ways seems to be really helpful, and other ways, in this case, I have some things to learn. So I'll definitely have to check into that.
Yeah, if you look at third edition or Pathfinder, you'll see tons of templates. It was kind of an interesting concept but could quickly get out of control as well. Like I know Ted at one point wanted to see how many templates he could possibly slap on any given creature. And a lot of the undead in third edition became templates as opposed to specific monsters. So you would put the Lich template, on top of, the wizard or whatever it was, or a vampire template, and that's how you create a whole new monster.
Yeah. So yeah, there is now I understand more of where you're coming from. So, for example, the Skeleton King, which I've talked about, which is already going to be in the book, and the initial stat block I'll put out this week. So that creature is basically a version of the Lich, I should say. There's a new monster I just made up. So a version of the Lich with a few other abilities added in there. So some undead, kind of other undead abilities. So we have like, in terms of making the stat blocks, creating some of these monsters, there will be some combinations for sure.
DM Dom wants to know, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but when are you going to do a Great Old Ones book?
Yeah, well, now that we've started to see more of what kind of creatures people want, I mean, I'm definitely, piqued my interest in maybe doing a second version of this book, because like I said, we have over 200 monsters. Yeah, it's that's something that I know as my players are always asking me, and I had to create for my own homebrew setting, was all of a sudden come up with what are the Great Old Ones and who are they and what can they do. And so, because Warlock has been incredibly popular in my group.
Now, you know what? There was a question I saw and I meant to ask, and I thought it was a really good one. I forget who asked it, guys. Sorry. And I'm just going to ask, are you going to do anything with sidebars as far as familiars, especially for like Pack of the Chains Warlocks for Fae?
Yeah, so we're definitely looking at all the connections with Warlock, and that's the kind of thing that we might have an extra page. Like I told you that a few people have asked for a bit more lore of the general setting. In terms of that, and we're saying, well, we can maybe use another page, or we can add in a table. Dave and I were talking about tables earlier. A table on a page that maybe there's a smaller stat block, So yeah, we're definitely looking at that. I mean, the Warlock connection to Great Old Ones and to Fae, there's a huge gap there in terms of any kind of resources.
So both Nick Minot and Evil Silly Putty want to know about player options.
Okay, so this book, we're not going to go in that direction, other than, like I said, the connection for the Warlock to Fae. So yeah, we're limited in our space, and wanting to make sure that we have 100 creatures with illustrations. However, as Dave said, if you want to do another book, an option is Great Old Ones. Well, another book would be options more in terms of the lore of the Feyland and player options. So maybe look to us maybe next fall or the beginning of next year, and yeah, we could look at that.
We're always starving for more options, and especially 5e, because Wizards of the Coast have been really really slow in their releases, and which is, I mean, it's good for people like ourselves and you, Andrew, who are creating third-party content, because there's a need. People want more content, and Wizards is definitely, and I actually appreciate the way they're doing it. They want to make sure they're putting out quality over quantity.
Yeah, I'm on board with that for sure. And I don't knock them for having only 7 Fae in the Monster Manual. They have a lot to cover, and everybody has their own favorites. For me, I wouldn't want any dinosaurs, but then you never know. I know Tomb of Annihilation has been really popular, so they have to try to please everybody, and that's never an easy job.
That is the truth. And it's kind of funny too, with like dinosaurs is one of those things that people either they love it in their D&D or they absolutely hate it in their D&D.
Yep.
There is no middle ground at all.
No. Yeah, there's a few things that I never have in my game, and and it's always been like that. And definitely, yeah, I'm more into the traditional fantasy setting and mythology. But this book will do some of that, and then we'll try to have something added in for everybody.
So is there anything that you're not going to be able to get into the book that you wanted to, just because of constraints, or maybe you're looking to the future for different products?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, if we have over 200 monsters, I think, that are really good. And then we have people like today who've mentioned creatures that I'm not familiar with. So we could easily make 2 of these, I think. So choosing the top 100 is actually going to be really hard. I never thought that would be true. And it's not going to be 100% Fae. We will have a few other types of creatures that would be in those lands. And I always want to make sure that things are practical too. I know sometimes it seems like monster collections, people just take one wheel and spin it, and another wheel and spin it. And on the one wheel it says dog, and the other wheel it says eel, and they're like, oh, we'll make a dog eel. Because some of these Fae you're never going to use. I think some of the Volos Fae are not super practical. I mean, the Quickling, the Darkling, the Boggle, I think those are great, but some of the others are kind of obtuse. So we want to make sure the monsters we have in the book are ones that could be used not only in the Feyland, but in other adventures. And then, like I said, there's so many monsters left over. It'd be nice to have that. And the more that people ask for lore about the Feyland, it would be nice to have space to do that. So we'll see. We'll see where our funding goal ends up, and maybe we can add in more lore to this book than we planned.
Yeah, I think I ended up having to use a Quorid for my Leprechaun. Because I didn't feel like recreating a monster from scratch. So I'm like, it's pretty close. I'm like, this will work.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, so he was very leprechaun light. He was just dressed like a leprechaun, really. He was a Korid that mugged a leprechaun for his clothes.
Yeah. Some of them I like monsters that I can use over and over and over. And things like the Quickling and Volos and the Darkling. And people were talking about abilities for Fae. I love the ability of the Darkling when they die, that they explode. My players were totally freaked out when that happened the first time. We're taking damage after we've killed it.
Yeah. When winning feels like losing. Methods are great for that too, and they're such a weak monster.
Yeah, or the players when they give you that look when they're a Warlock and they do Hellish Rebuke. You hit me, but now I'm going to get you back.
I like methods as almost as a hazard. They're like little landmines that your players will walk into.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody was asking earlier about other Fae abilities that we'd like to get in there. So I'd love stuff like that, things like the Darkling's ability. So Darklings, Boggles, Quicklings, I could use all the time. Satyrs for the most part. Yeah, I like as a DM, I like creatures that I could use a number of different times. Not creatures where there's only going to be one place that I could use this creature, and I might never use them again for 10 years.
Quicklings are one of those monsters that punch way above their weight class. They,
I wonder about that CR rating.
Yeah.
I looked at that today, and I went, 1?
But at the same time, it's like one shot, they're done. But they have the ability to run in and out of combat. And so literally most of the time the attack that they get is an attack of opportunity at disadvantage. But I had so much fun using one because they were going after a Fey Pack Warlock, and he happened to have one of these and a Yeth Hound in his service, and it would just run in the room and run out, and they wouldn't even see what happened, and all of a sudden everyone's spurting blood.
Yeah, they're nasty. Like I still think for a low-level party, they're gonna be a handful.
Oh no, you can't use them on a low-level party. Now,
but they're CR1. You could technically use them really early on. I don't know about first level. I'd have to double check, but
yeah, well, by the budget, it's a little bit different. But orcs are a half a CR, and our first player death was like a second-level character to an orc. And an orc with a crit just does a decent amount of damage.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and we have had 2 players killed by skeletons, and not one at about 4th level and one at about 6th level. And it was just they ran away from the party both times. They ran into a basement where there were skeletons. One was in Curse of Strahd, and one was in an adventure I did, and they just had terrible rolls. And the skeletons crit, and they were because they were away from the party. The party didn't even know. So it's again that law of not splitting up the group.
I've had some player deaths that way. One of my players ran away from a combat into a choker, which was amazing. And I like the 5th edition version, but in 3rd edition they were even a little bit tougher. So they didn't even know what happened to him for a while because they didn't find the body because the choker got him and drug him up into his crevice in the ceiling. So yeah, those kind of monsters are a lot of fun. Red Jackal wants to know: will you be using any of the Fae items or mythos from Black Cauldron, the book, not the movie?
That I'm not familiar with, so that's another one I'm going to have to add to my list here for homework.
Well, at least
I would just say that I do want to definitely have specific items, and we have made 2 so far. So the Skeleton King has a special staff, and the Frog Witch, who we were talking about earlier, has one as well. And they have really unusual abilities. So I'll have to look at that specific resource. But I do want to have magic items connected to these creatures, especially the Arc Fae. And magic is going to be a huge deal in the Feyland. So, yeah.
So, judging by a lot of the questions that have come in, there's got to be a minimum of a half a dozen people that ask about Fae player options.
Wow.
So if you're wondering if there's a demand for that, I'm guessing there is, because about 10% or more of the people watching have asked. Unless it's the same person watching, asking over and over again. Yeah, see, I'm just glancing. There's another one. Any plans for more Fae player races? And there's a bunch of them like that.
The one thing about that I would add is that it's not that hard to change for 5th edition, to change monsters to PCs. I know somebody's done that with all the monsters in the monster manual. And we did, like, for example, we have a version of the Ranger in the book, which is a combination Ranger, Rogue, Scout, Elf creature. It'd be very easy to change that into a new class. So there'll be a number of creatures like that you could easily reskin as PC.
Let's see. The Mighty Hobbs had a question. Are you going to do a section for GMs on how to run Fae?
That might be something that we would add in the beginning of the book. Yeah, that's a very, very good idea. And that's the kind of thing we might add around these monsters, where the focus was going to be on making sure we have 100 great stat blocks, wicked art, and some interesting bios.
Cause, I mean, that's actually a really good point too, with the idea of some kind of write up on running Fae, because you shouldn't really be running them like your orcs and your goblins. They're just not a different kind of humanoid or monster to throw at your players. They really are a different kind of mindset. It's it should be almost alien to the way we think.
Yeah, it's true. You could do something in the beginning there. We were going to put it in individual stat blocks, but you could have an opening where you talk about the different courts, evil and seelie and unseelie. You could talk about the deals that people could make. You could talk about the wild Fae. So it's a good idea like you said, in terms of directing DMs. We were thinking about doing that kind of thing within each monster, giving some clues about that. But another way to do that would be to have an opening page or two about that. Yeah, that's a good idea.
And the Red Jackal is sorry for all the questions. Actually, we appreciate the questions. And if one person has a question, there's usually a couple other that do too, that just aren't asking it. So
yeah, that's why we're here.
You're doing a community service by asking your questions. It definitely helps out and fleshes things out, as well as, as Andrew said several times, it's like, oh, I didn't know about that. That's something else for me to take a look at. So it's helpful.
Yeah, that's why one reason we had some polls, and we have this AMA on Kickstarter about a week and a half ago. There's great ideas, and we wanted people. We said, if you're a backer, message us, send us information. We're open. We have our list of creatures that we're thinking about for the book, and some of them are it's a very brief sketch, and others we've got most of the creatures already created. So the more information for us, the better. Yep.
Awesome. So we are coming up on the hour mark. It always goes by so fast. If I'll leave you with whatever parting words you want to leave to the audience.
Well, I just encourage people to take a look at our Kickstarter, and if you need more creatures for your 5e table, which as a DM I'm always looking for more creatures, take a look at Monsters of Feyland. We've got 4 more days. We need another 9% to be backed, so we're pretty close. And our first stretch goals are a Fantasy Grounds version of the book, which a lot of people want. And our second is some really amazing dice from Q Workshop in Poland. And then the other stretch goals are adventures and a campaign setting connection. So we encourage people to take a look at the Kickstarter, see if you're interested in having a new collection of monsters, hardcover book. We're trying to have it look like the core books. And we really love the artists we're working with, and yeah, and if you want to take a look, we have 6 creatures so far, and you can look at some examples of those on the Kickstarter page.
Well, I want to thank you for coming and hanging out with me today, and thanks everyone who came out and watched and asked your questions. Sorry if there's a couple at the end we didn't get to, but until next time, guys, stay nerdy.
Thanks, Dave.